And narratives matter. They matter greatly. Narratives about Africa have been too often dominated by poverty, by corruption, by poor leadership, by disease. I can tell you, growing up in the global north, white savior narratives were often dominant and have led to very, very unjust Western entanglements on the continent. These narratives portray a continent that is broken, that's dependent on outsiders, and that lacks agency. And of course, we all know that's not true. Having spent time now on the continent, it's even more evident that the continent is not broken. The problems of Africa, as you say, as has been said earlier, are not unique to Africa. And Africa, I see an Africa characterized by dynamism, by entrepreneurialism, by innovation, by an amazing pool of existing and particularly emerging leaders that is quite capable of addressing and solving its own problems. But the negative narratives remain problematic, and I think it was as Tony Elumelu, I've seen him say that the biggest challenge that the continent has in attracting investment is the way the continent is portrayed and perceived. I actually think at the Chandler Foundation, we have supported several organizations on the continent that are, I think, helping to provide leadership that's values driven, that's based on integrity, that's based on local values, cultures, and traditions. Organizations like Emerging Public Leaders, like African Leadership Academy. I think investing in the young people of Africa is absolutely important, and I think Africa's youth is its comparative advantage. As I look from the outside, much of the world that is often defined as advanced is aging, and aging is becoming a very significant problem for much of the global north. Africa doesn't have that same problem and should lean into that comparative advantage. There's a framework called the Open Government Partnership. Okay. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it is a partnership that was created about 12 years ago. It was created by leaders from this continent, both from the government and from civil society, together with some outsiders, including my then president, President Barack Obama, who created a partnership that this is a framework in which government, the private sector, and civil society create national action plans about how government can become more open, more filled with integrity, more filled with accountability and inclusivity. I think as of today, something like 15 countries on the continent are members of this open government partnership. And you have to meet certain eligibility criteria in order to be eligible. I see that partnership working in the countries where the Chandler Foundation is involved. And it creates a framework where you can have multi-stakeholder dialogue. We talked about the various roles that the public sector and the private sector. We haven't spoken as much about civil society, but I think civil society has a very, very important role to play as well. So if you're looking for things that are examples of what's working and can help propel the continent and its countries forward in terms of good governance, I would point to the Open Government Partnership. One thing that I think hasn't been mentioned yet so far, we've emphasized the importance of changing mindsets and the role that narratives play in changing mindsets. And changing mindsets, I believe, is at the foundation of changing systems. If we talk about systems change, we often think about changing laws, changing resource flows, changing institutions. And all of that, of course, is necessary, but it's typically built on a foundation of changing mindsets. And that requires changing narratives. Now, as to the challenges of changing narratives, we have to recognize that we as humans are hardwired to pay more attention to bad news than good news. I mean, this is not unique to Africans. This is a human condition, and it's referred to as a negativity bias. And there's a mountain of evidence from many, many studies that show that bad news, bad things, one, grab our attention, two, they stick to our memory, and three, many times, they influence our decisions. Evolutionary biologists would give you their reasons for why that is true, but it is true, and we have to recognize that as we try to change narratives. You know, the news media, which you're a part of, recognize this more than most. I think the phrase that was attributed to an American media tycoon, William Randolph Hearst, said, "If it bleeds, it leads," which means basically if it's violent, gory, bad news, that's the story you want to make most prominent because you're going to catch the eyes and ears of your viewers with it. So particularly with the news media, we all have to recognize that negative bias in ourselves as a significant challenge that we have to address in overcoming these negative narratives.